Got a friend in Santiago, got a friend in Berlin, got a friend 100 miles away, who's as close as my hand. Distance couldn't keep us apart because we're one man with one heart.
We all want to know what's going on, but it's hard to know what's happening, where we are, and why things are happening if we don't have the right starting point for that kind of inquiry. You're watching Cobb TV Live, and this is The Inner Stream. The beginning of any serious investigation as to what's actually going on must start with one particular question. And from that question, you can get both the starting and the ending point for that analysis. Actually, it's not possible to really do a true analysis unless you have an idea of the ending point from that initial question. In the introduction to the study of the 10 Sephirot, these are the 10 qualities that govern our world and the worlds above it. Bala Salam writes, "Indeed, if we set our hearts to answer but one very famous question, I'm certain that all these questions and doubts will vanish from the horizon. And if you will look into their place to find them gone, this indignant question is a question that the whole world asks, namely, what is the meaning of my life? In other words, these numbered years of our life that cost us so heavily, and the numerous pains and torments that we suffer for them, to complete them to the fullest, who is it who enjoys them? Or even more precisely, whom do I delight?" That's the first question. It is indeed true that historians have grown weary contemplating it, and particularly in our generation. No one even wishes to consider it. Yet the question stands as bitterly and as vehemently as ever. Sometimes it meets us uninvited, pecks at our minds and humiliates us to the ground before we find the famous ploy of flowing mindlessly in the currents of life as always. That question is, what is the meaning of my life? What is the purpose of my life? And that is really the beginning of any kind of understanding. But that has to be a real question. That has to be the question that comes from the bottom of a person's heart. But there's good news, because that's the starting point for the Kabbalists. And those who have found the pattern of nature and existence within themselves, who have completed the whole ladder of these degrees, the highest and the higher of which allow a person to begin to answer that question, they've gone all the way to the core of our existence and tell us what the meaning of life is. And from this meaning of life, you have the pattern of everything else that happens here and that happens to us from here forward. The purpose of life, they tell us, is to create a creature and to fill the creature with delight. So what that means is that there is a state, a complete and whole state, an unbounded state of interconnection that's really the starting point. That's before anything is differentiated. And then something becomes differentiated. It begins to lower, it begins to drop in its quality from that beginning place of totality, wholeness. And because of a certain quality, it, so to speak, lowers down into a place that's called this world. This world is filled with a lack of that state, and is dominated by, guided by, is a world of desire. And there is a force, there is a vector that comes from the emptiness that's instilled in us. And then this purpose in life begins to fulfill that emptiness. And how we understand that emptiness and what we think being filled with delight is, well, that's the process that we undergo here. That's also the experience that we have in life. That's why our perceptions change, because how we define this purpose of creation, what we feel empty about, and what we feel filled by, and what we tend to want, what we see as the future, what we feel as what would be great to experience. This determines our definition of what we are, where we are. The goal, though, of this creation of life and its fulfillment, to its complete fulfillment, is in the pattern of that first state, though. Not in what we think in the in-between state, not of the things that we imagine, the lesser desires that we feel, but it has to do with that very first state, where we were not disconnected. But there's a difference. We undergo this sort of lack, this drop and this lack of that first state. Because in that first state, it had nothing to do with what we are or our quality. So we're sent on an adventure, basically, in which we rediscover this beautiful, incredible, whole quality of life itself, but not just because it's happening to us from above, so to speak, that it's being given to us. We discover how to actually become completely like that, because the only thing that this thought of creation can give to us is itself. So we become ultimately fulfilled by reconnecting everything, reconnecting between us, reconnecting with it, and the adventure of the doubts, the questions, the turning points, the things that seem not to be going right, all of that incredible drama leads us to this ultimate fulfillment in which we reach that same state, but not like a puppet, not like something that merely receives, but through a choice. We actually are impelled by this creative force to become just like it. Now, everything that we feel here, every desire that we have, is really just a reflection of that process. But how we understand that, how we feel it at any given stage of our development, has to do with where we are in what we define that as, by where we are in a progression of the development of desires. And that tells us the whole story of whatever events we're seeing around us. We can track where we are when we understand what the basic question and purpose of life is, what the destination of life is, and that's the blueprint of everything, and it's felt in a map according to the desires that we hold that are either the same or different than that original starting point and the ultimate destination. And with that, we can begin to understand where we are. But it would help us if we could hear what we are seeing. Let me stop that for a sec. Mm-hmm. And here we go.
From love of friends to love for all. A person is born into a world full of evidence that it's all outside of him. For decades, he negotiates his surroundings as if in a hostile jungle. Then some hotshot scientist comes along and says that it's all within his self-styled perception. It's a nice theory, but we see what we see. But what happens when a person surrounds himself with people with a common goal? He's persuaded by their vision, their desires, and dreams. When that group's sole desire is that each person try to fulfill the needs of others, by making this practice a habit, the person's second nature becomes a giving nature, receiving only in order to please the others. Until one day, strangely, impossibly, a person feels that he truly loves these people. But something even stranger happens. It turns out that this love he feels can be extended beyond the boundaries of the group to the rest of humanity. Only now can you relate to the seemingly outside world as a part of yourself. And then we see that the fact that it was all a part of me was the true reality all along. The end.
And all around us, in the world that we see now, we see a kind of connection, but it's an external sort of a connection. It's already here in a very real way among us. Real because so many people agree that this is what's happening, and it takes that kind of collective agreement for us to say, this is something that's real. And we see on the internet phenomena of connection. We've got Facebook, we have Twitter, we've got YouTube, where people sort of show their lives, show what's happening around them. We feel this sort of external interconnection with each other. But it is actually a reflection of that primary thought of creation, the purpose of life, that we would reach a point where this kind of connection would be evident. And we're kind of at a tipping point with that in a very positive way, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But there are already expressions of that kind of longing. We see it in many things, and it touches us, and sometimes you don't even know why is it touching me like that? What is it that gets to me? And this is, I want to share with you a little bit of this video called "Where the Hell is Matt?" It's very beautiful. You probably have already seen this. Let's just take a look at this for a bit. So this guy, Matt, has traveled around the world going to all the famous and beautiful sights that the world has to offer. And in each place, he does this little dance. And there's something that touches you when you see this. Is it the dancing? Is it the fact that he's everywhere in the world? It's all of this. It's that this video reflects, on a certain level, this desire that we have to go through this drama in the thought of creation, to be connected globally, to agree with it in joy, to do it together. And these qualities bring us, they give us a kind of an ecstasy. You can't help but be inspired by the combination of all this. The fact that he's jumping over time and space, that he's with everybody no matter what, they all join in every place. Still, that's the external part of this, because it's momentary. What's great about it is that this is our desire. What's sad about it is that when the video stops, not a single person other than Matt is involved in those qualities. They're not connected to each other. They're not in joy about their lives. They're not engaged in something above time and space. But don't we wish that we were? That is kind of the bright side of this longing. The dark side of it is something else. It is something that happened a couple of weeks ago, is another expression of this, and that is the Love Parade that happened in Duisburg in Germany. This is a festival in which people came from all over the world in order to do those same things. Be together, dance together, share an experience. They came from all over in order to, for many hundreds of thousands, I think, 100,000, few hundred thousand people to be together. And it turned into something completely opposite. And this is also because of the quality of the thought of creation, the purpose of life, our desire to reach that, but according to where we are on a scale of the development of desires. And from the Euro News, the article says, why? That's the question that all of Germany is asking the day after the Love Parade went so horribly wrong. How could 21 revelers be killed and more than 300 others injured, some seriously, at one of Europe's most popular dance music festivals? Security measures have been criticized at the event in Duisburg, near Dusseldorf. As a result of the disaster, the long-running techno party, first held in 1989, is now a thing of the past. Always a peaceful event and a happy party, the Love Parade will forever be overshadowed by yesterday's tragic accident. This is an article, of course, from last week. The event's organizer told, and there's a name of a fellow here, told a news conference, out of respect for the victims, their families, and friends, we will discontinue the event, and this means the end of the Love Parade. Panicked partygoers struggling to escape the deadly crush at a tunnel leading into the festival. Police have defended their handling of security, blah, blah, blah. They insist that their helicopters had seen no signs of overcrowding at the site, and they estimated far fewer people attending than it was 1.4 million first announced. Victims of the stampede include a Dutch, an Australian, an Italian, and a Chinese national. This is such the irony of the name of this Love Parade. What does it show us? Why is it happening? It's happening because of that we are barely at this place where we are about to be able to do what it's in our heart to do in response to the thought of creation. But we can't do it based on the qualities that we have been developing with up until now. So let's get another part of this whole system that the Kabbalists tell us about. Let's take a look at the other part of the equation, the development of our desires. Now, a person, they tell us, develops on a scale of desires, but it's not just a person that does this. Every individual, of course, is only this desire to receive what the thought of creation wants to give us. That's the intention that we have. And when we start out in life, the first thing that we want and need and see as pleasure are those things that satisfy our existence. Just food, sex, family, those basic things that have to do with our necessity. They have hardly anything to do with other people. We would need those things whether or not we lived with other people, just like animals do. They're not even really a human desire. But as we move on and we develop individually, and actually as a society, we develop what we see as great and wonderful and fulfilling and as a bright horizon on the future is wealth. We need to accumulate all those things that our body needs. But we see that that's empty once we have that. And then we desire something else. We want power. We want honor. Now, where a person eventually gets to is they want to know, to have all of the control over everything on this basic level of this world. And that dividing line is knowledge. When a person sees that there's nothing really in that either, that doesn't give the proper clothing for this thing that is in them, this really deep desire that's implanted by the thought of creation. We develop both as individuals and as a civilization over time. We start to desire something outside of this world, something that cannot be gotten here. It's a sensation of something greater. It's a desire that tips us into a correct expression of this deepest inner desire that we have. This is what's called spirituality, but it really is a desire to fulfill the thought of creation on its actual terms. It's a desire for connection and wholeness, and this is called a desire to have the desire. I want to have the desire to connect and to bestow to everything, to life as a whole. This is really a very different clothing of precisely that same thing that we saw of Matt dancing. Same desire. It's aimed really at the same target. It's the same desire in the kids, the revelers who went to the love parade. But the inability to fulfill that desire at a place like the love parade, or to sustain it dancing with Matt for a few seconds strung together. The ability to actually fulfill this, for it not to be just a momentary inspiration, a momentary joy. But remember that the thought of creation is to create a creature and to fill the creature with delight, unbounded delight. That means it's permanent, it grows, it is fulfilled and it grows. Because it can only be fulfilled in a permanent way once we tip out of the final corporal desire, which is the desire for knowledge. When we want to do this on its actual terms, then it's possible to connect all over the world, above time and space, in a way that is totally different. Let me show you a different kind of connection. This is, yes. Here you can see in this slideshow, on exactly the same weekend as the Love Parade, there was a worldwide mega congress of people who study or are interested in connecting through Kabbalah, in learning what the thought of creation is, how a person can enter into that process, and enter into it in a permanent way. There were hundreds of thousands of people all over the world, and there were also many thousands of people in one particular location in Tel Aviv, and people all over the world connected to this. And there was not a single broken limb. Life didn't end in that situation. For many, life really began. And there you see a kind of a love parade, a connection, a dancing all over the world that is real, that is permanent, and something very special happened. Not only did it succeed and people weren't hurt, but it succeeded on the level of that desire called spirituality. There actually was a connection, a unity felt by all of these people, and many, many, many people since that event have spoken about it. They've written about it. They have felt some kind of a connection, a unity that never existed before for them, and it happened all over the world. What's the difference between these two events? It's really only one thing. In the love parade, the desire was to enjoy for myself. It's just this side of the spiritual, because the desire to be together, the desire to share, and all of that was really there. It's there for the entire world. Really wants this. And in the Mega Congress, the desire was to enjoy for others. That's the whole thing that everybody was working on there. That's why they went, to test that out. They went there to test entry into a new world, into another part of this whole process of the thought of creation. Not the first part, and not the part where we come down into this sort of second state where we desire, but we don't know really what we should desire, or how we should desire, or how our desires actually guide us. It's this other part, the part where we now begin to ascend, where we now begin to agree with this bestowal, with doing it not for me. Where does the pleasure lie? It doesn't lie in sex, in family, in money. It doesn't lie in power. It doesn't lie even in knowledge, even in the things that we think constitute the greatest stuff that humanity could possibly do. Art, science, all that stuff. No, it's something beyond that. It's something above that. It's something that includes it, that celebrates it. It's something that allows everybody to become like that first thing, but that first quality, but by deciding, by doing it, by choosing, by agreeing with this whole thing. This is the turning point in the creation. Up to now, we've come to the halfway point. From now on, we're in the second part. We are going through an ascent, a conscious ascent, back to that starting point, but it becomes ours. In other words, we start fulfilling the purpose of our lives. The purpose of our lives are not to get a certain job and to do a certain thing and, be a vet or whatever those things are. It'd be wonderful if you love animals. I do. To love them up and take care of them or do some particular thing for humanity. Yes, we're all supposed to do some particular thing for humanity, but that's not the purpose. That's not a person's purpose. A person's purpose is to go beyond, to come out of themselves, and to become part of this bestowing force that we feel by getting connected to other people, like the kids at the Love Parade, like the kids at the Mega Congress. The entire world needs to dress this desire in higher and higher, more elegant, more inclusive, more beautiful clothing. And the only difference between what ends in disaster when you try to unite the world And what ends in success and the completion of the thought of creation is just, who do I do it for? In other words, what Bala Salam said in that quote, whom do I delight? That's the turning point in our development of creation. Not do I delight, but who do I delight? Me? Or do I agree with this thought of creation and do this only in order to fulfill it? That is a completely new desire. And it creates a completely new reality, a completely new world.
All of the children are being called to be as one again, and where one desire that cannot be filled unless we come back again, where we will be one. In a brand new world, there's a brand new world where the brand new world, with no more concealment, all shall be revealed with the hand that will lead us back again, where we will be one. Obedient freedom will no longer bleed, we will cleave on to thee again, and your light will lead us to the brand new world. There's a brand where the brand new world, the times are changing, we are rearranging, we are awakening to the brand new world. There's a brand new world where the brand new worlds, in the brand new world, there's a brand new world where the brand new world.
That was Mike Vermeulen and the guys from the BB Global Band. It's a beautiful tune. We got some questions, some text questions and an audio question. First question's from Mary in New Mexico. She says, we've been told that we become independent by rising above our nature, gaining the quality of bestowal. So if I receive, I am condemning myself to spiritual death because I'm not independent. Yet I must receive in order to reach spirituality. What to do? Our nature is the will to receive. It's not an either-or situation. It's a why do I receive? If I receive for myself, then I'm dealing with an intention. The desire to receive something, that's just nature. That's how we're built. That's our only tool. That's actually what the creation is. That's the one thing that was created, was this lack. We must receive. Our existence depends on it. You know, you can't go without food. You can't go without water. That's on the physical level. On the spiritual level, your very being is that you receive. That's not the problem. That has nothing to do with egoism. That's just a fact. The thing that's called the screen and reflected light, that is the ability, the screen is an intention. Kabbalists tell us about the screen. It's an intention. And the intention is just about, for whom do I receive? If I receive only in order to fulfill the thought of creation, then I'm receiving in order to bestow to that force, to what we call the Creator. Then that's not receiving. That's actually giving. Because one is doing it only to fulfill the purpose that came from the totality. It came from something basically outside of this little egoistic shell that we have, this little egoistic intention. That's considered to be outside. That's why we see things as external, why we think there are other people and that there is some kind of brokenness in this world. That's only because of the desire that we hold. It's not because that's the way that it is. So if a person wants to see this objective aspect of life, what is outside of them, what you could call truth, then it has to be according to an intention that's like the intention that put the entire system of purpose into action. That was started by an intention. And there is no time and there is no space on that level of spirituality. So that intention must and will be fulfilled. It's just, do you want to be in it, or do you want to like drag on forever as though you were outside of it? All that it takes, it's not spiritual death to receive. It is just the delaying of the fulfillment of the thought of creation to receive from myself. So what do? You work on changing that. You work on wanting to change that. You yourself can't do it. In connection with other people, and when you're working towards that goal with other people, it is possible because we accumulate that force that we call it's real because other people also experience it. And as I said about the Mega Congress, many, many people experience that the leading edge of that thing. We have a question from Jerry from the UK. And he says, throughout evolution, our desires, which carry the qualities of love and bestowal from the Reshimo means memory in a sense, of the upper worlds, get stronger and stronger, eventually pushing us towards the spiritual level. What happens when we enter the spiritual world? Will our desires end? Or being in equivalence of form with the Creator, will they become in order to do good to the creatures without a thought for oneself? Desires don't disappear. What desires we identify with is what changes. And there's always the work that we do here in the preparatory period when we're still dealing with those basic corporal desires are all necessary. They help us once we pass that sort of barrier where we actually exit our egoistic intention. But the desires stay there. We work above those desires and we start to encounter desires on a completely different level. A person is already relating to that force called the Creator in a somewhat revealed way. It's not like I believe it. It's like I'm experiencing how nature works with me, even above these desires. I begin to see what is the real causal level of things according to how much I'm like it or not like it. So the desires that we work with are different. They're a completely different order of desire. I'll say this, and I won't say more than that because it couldn't, you have to have the vessel for it in order to understand what that is, but it means that we want to use that force of nature called the Creator, or we want to use God, or however you want to put it, to benefit ourselves. That's the temptation. It's not that we don't know that there is such a thing as a creator or a force like that looks over everything, that is guiding this entire blueprint, that it's always only good. We get past that, and you see that it actually is this this benevolent force of nature. But then we want to start to use it. And it goes like that until we rise above that and above that and above that. And then what's past that, let's talk about it when we get there. And there's a question here from Carmen from Tenerife. Now, this is the second question that she sent, and I wanted to know where Tenerife is. So let's check this out. Let's go to Google Earth. Let's go to the screen here for Google Earth. Tenerife. Is it searching? No. Oh yeah, here we go. There we are. It's in the Canary Islands. But she doesn't say what, she's like our friend from the UK. She's just from that particular island. And, see, we have friends all over the world here. How do you get this to go out? Oh, that's going in. That's very cool. Here we go, out. A little further out. Canary Islands off the coast of Africa. They belong to Spain. And there's our house. I can see my house from here. Planet Earth. She says, can you tell me, how does the study of the structure of the upper worlds with all of those templates and formulas and mixtures, Vak, Zat, Roshim, Tabur, GE, Zivugs, okay, all of these terms, worlds, etc., how all such like a DNA of the root of the light, how can we use it to get equivalence of form and to reach the end of correction? Is it not the matter just to awake our inner force and recognize our spiritual root and let the upper force operate in us? I just want to know, why is all that information necessary to accomplish our mission? Actually, I find more help reading the books like the Zohar or Shemati or Attaining the Worlds Beyond or Rav Lightman's blog. Why are all these technical things important? Well, ultimately they're not important. They're just a way of holding. First of all, we have to understand that all that we're talking about in the laws of nature, Kabbalah, is the relationship of things to each other until we begin to see the totally interrelated nature of things. And really, all of those diagrams and all of that information are trying to tell us where we're going. You have to have a map. You have to have some kind of thing that tells you something about your next state. Now, if you're a woman, and I'm not sure, but I think you are, Carmen, because if you're Spanish, Carmen is usually, although I do know a Carmen who's a guy, then it's not that important to you at all. You just need to know the very basics of that. You have to understand certain basic structure, and then you can begin, as you begin to experience, you see, oh, yeah, these are things in me. This is how I'm built. I relate. I have this feeling about receiving, and I have this feeling about bestowing. And when I want to try to bestow, I see that I can't do it because of this, and then I feel a darkness, and I start to drop, and all of these things. And then something happens, and my desire to get there attracts the light that sort of pulls me, and I start to see the connection again. And all of that is laid out in these structures. If you're a man, you need these things, because it actually performs a correction. It attracts the light to study this kind of stuff. If you're a woman, you don't attract light by doing that. There's another methodology that has to do with connection and support It's a similar process, but it differs in a particular way. And we have a question, an audio question that came in. Yeah, here it is.
Hi, my name is Sarah from Virginia, and I just participated in the Mega Congress last weekend, and it was awesome. It was fantastic. I couldn't believe the energy and the feeling of connection that I had as I was participating virtually, and when looking at the screen and feeling connected with everybody all over the world, it was just phenomenal. But then, like Monday, I went to work, and driving, and once I get into the building, I was in the midst of where I've been working there for 5 years, and there was such a difference between the feeling of connection that I had for the weekend, and my feeling is that is the way that it really should be in the world, and then yet in my everyday reality, I guess you could call it, it was so different. And my question is, how do I deal with that? How do I put those two things together? It's almost unbearable to be in work now, and I'm constantly thinking about how it felt to be connected, and yet the contrast is so great. So any insights you have about that? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, once a very bright light shines, once we open ourselves and feel that unity, it has to cast a long shadow. We begin to see that the world that we live in doesn't live according to the law of the upper world, that is the law of love and connection. It really lives according to these lower desires. It has a basic animal level of survival, and that's not what we are. We actually are that spiritual level, is the level of that humanity is supposed to be. And when you start living in that place compared to knowledge, or compared to power, or compared to wealth, or the basics of survival, you can see that that's not much of a world. The whole point, though, is to go back, not to cut off anything. You have to be in the world, you have to work, you have to then bring that state that you reached, you have to hold on to it, bring it to the next lesson, the next encounter with people that you are working with for the same purpose. And the desire that you begin to feel when you're away from it now starts to build that thing in you that actually is a desire to learn to bestow. That's what we need. We need the correct efficiency. Speaking about connections, external and internal connections, and the web that goes across all of humanity, let's spend a little time. Hopefully, I'll be able to come back just for a moment and tie things up. But let's go to our something that we taped in our New York studios, dealing with exactly the same concept as what we're talking about here.
Hello everyone, you're watching Cab TV, Asaf here, and today I have a good friend of mine in the studio with us. His name is John Keck, and John is an internet professional. He worked in the high-tech industry for over 10 years. Today he has his own company. John, how are you doing?
Good.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience in that realm?
Okay. Well, I started out programming as a programmer at Real Networks in 1999, and it was a really great time to be involved in technology. It was a lot of ideas, a lot of stuff where we would think something up and we'd do something right away. And we started out with the Real Player, which was the first streaming player. So we had radio shows.
I remember it, and I used it.
Yeah. It was very popular. It was one of the places I really
was effective because the file size were so little, so small file size.
Exactly. And back then, most people were on the internet on using a modem.
Mm-hmm.
So we really had to optimize. And you look at it now, and it looks like the dinosaur age. But we were just real thrilled to have to be able to see video. I time when the first video codecs were developed. But we did that, and then we branched off into doing more content stuff. We did a lot of subscriptions. We were the first online subscription company. We did MLB. We did the first Big Brother 24-hour live broadcast. Later on, CNN we worked with. We did one of the first music products that was very much like iTunes before iTunes did it, but iTunes ended up doing it much better a few years later. But it was very exciting, and I learned a lot. We also made a lot of mistakes. We figured out what people liked, what they didn't like, and we had different approaches to doing things that now things have settled out a lot more.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to ask you, John, from your perspective, being there when the internet literally developed and came into being and actually became what it is right now, how do you think, from your perspective, that it has affected our development as a society and the things that it brought with it?
Well, it's funny because it's something now that I can't even imagine not having anymore. I can't imagine it not being in my life. It's like running water or something. You think of something, you want to go see a movie, you go online, you find out about the reviews. You want to buy something, you look at reviews. News, whatever it is.
Right, communication. Yeah. Email is pretty much the thing we can't live without these days.
Exactly. But and it's also made it a lot of the technologies, they keep coming out with new ways. Now it's the iPhone applications. There's another whole other world that's opening up in terms of what's possible with that. And so I think the main thing is that you can communicate with a lot of people instantly, and it's inexpensive. It's not like it's a real barrier to be able to communicate in all these different ways. You can publish yourself, which is something that used to be that the only way to get published was have a publishing deal or something like that. Now it's
today you can just set up your own blog or your own website, and that's it, and you can be famous.
Right.
That thing specifically is interesting to me, and what you mentioned about the fact that you could be connected instantly to everyone or anyone in the world. And it's very interesting to see how all those social networks like Facebook and like Twitter and so on are really connecting people above space and time and differences. And I wanted to ask you, seeing how all these things have developed and actually how they came into being, how did you think they affected human relationships and human connections as they developed?
That's an interesting question, because I remember when blogging first came out, a lot of us were like thinking, what is this? Who's going to care? And you end up finding out later on that a lot of people care. And a lot of people now, blogging it's sort of a part of our culture now. We check out what people blog about, and so it's opened up the opportunity for people to express more opinion, which is something that, it has a good side and a darker side as well. But I think it's just made it possible for us to communicate instantly in all different venues. We can do it from a coffee shop, you can do it from your car, you can do it, out on a mountain somewhere in a lot of places, So it's made it possible to be connected and have other people find you, at any time. And so it's taken our world, kind of our work life and our personal life, and meshed them together in some way. So you're always kind of available.
Yeah, that's very true. To add another point of observation on this, I'd like to show a video clip that our editor found for this show. This is an excerpt from a really funny animation from a website called current.com. So let's watch it, and we'll talk about it.
Okay.
Watching TV with my cat.
I forgot how much I like pickles.
Who are they talking to?
No one and everyone.
This is how our generation communicates now.
Okay, but I don't care what other people are doing every second of the day.
Well, no, neither do I. But we do want other people knowing what we're doing, right?
None of you have any friends!
No!
People, you do exist, but you've become
That's a nice one.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is it true that really people from overusing or just using all these utilities, social networks like Twitter, really have become reliant on this constant self-affirmation, just letting people know what they do, just to get some sort of a feedback from it?
Yeah, I think so. I think that this is sort of where this is that dark side of all this communication, is that it's so easy to communicate. And I think the other thing that makes it dark as well is that you can, when if you've ever been on a site and watched the comments, the anonymous comment, the ability to anonymously comment something creates an attitude in people that you don't get, in personal relationships face to face. People won't say the sort of things that they say, and this technology has enabled that, and it's very interesting to watch people. I think you'd be shocked to see, if you were to tie those comments to the people, where those comments are actually coming from. The person. It's not just some crazy mad bomber guy in the basement doing it.
Exactly.
It's your neighbor.
I gotta say, from a Kabbalistic point of view, this is really, really interesting. The point you just made about people being able to say what they really want to say, or what they really feel, which is not necessarily that good most of the time, or good to hear, or good to read, but they actually feel comfortable doing that online, in the forums, in the chat rooms, in talkbacks. And to me, from a Kabbalistic view, this is very interesting, because it's showing that the internet is in a way helping us develop to what Kabbalah calls a phase that Kabbalah calls the recognition of our nature, of our true bad connection with each other, which is one step before correcting that connection towards a better situation, a better kind of connection. Another thing that's interesting is, I'm thinking about it. I'm not a big Twitter user or a Facebook user, but I guess you may know people, or yourself, who've used it a lot, and I'm wondering, like, what is it that a person gets from just sharing information about himself? Like, what kind of feeling does it give him? What kind of fulfillment? What do you think?
Well, from what I've seen, if you remember, a few years ago there was a Time Man of the Year, and I think it was Time Man of the Year, and it was you. And so we've come to this place where it's sort of like we're the stars of the universe. We're the stars in our own shows, and we do this with the virtual reality shows, and now it's Twitter, and now everybody's like kind of broadcasting themselves. Because YouTube, it's all about me, and it is a way of validating, and it's sort of kind of like, this is what I see is it's sort of faux or fake kind of celebrity or importance. It's like you get to go and tell everybody about things, and you can imagine how they're receiving what you're telling them. You can imagine what their perception is of you, but you don't really get to see the look on their face, or even if they're even paying attention, So you get to fill in what that person is experiencing, and I think for a lot of people, they prefer that.
That's interesting. So it's like it's like a one-sided communication in a way. By the way, talking about this whole development of me. In the front of everything, I think Steve Jobs, the Apple's CEO, really got on top of that. Thinking about all that iPhone, iTunes, this, that. He really understood, I guess, that putting the I in front of everything is the thing that has to do with our generation. Everyone has to feel that they're expressing themselves, that they have their own individual character, and it's like it plays a very, very strong role in this generation. And from a Kabbalistic perspective, there are two processes actually going on here. One is very obvious, the one that we're just outlining right now, which is the growth of our ego, really, the growth of our egoism that manifests in all those ways of people trying to express themselves, and the tools today that allow each and every common user to actually express themselves and their individuality in any possible way. But on the other hand, what I'm also seeing from all this development of internet connection and social networks and so on, is that we're also being kind of pushed to become connected, to become so intertwined, so integrated with each other, and this creates a real conflict, because on the one hand we want our individuality to be leading in our life, and we want it to play a central role. On the other hand, we need the others in order to express it. We need others in order for us to express ourselves. So I think that's a very interesting thing.
That's an interesting thing. I hadn't really thought about it like that, but it is true. You do feel like we're going somewhere as a society or as a culture. We're going somewhere, and we're experiencing all these things. We have no idea.
So if you enjoyed that conversation, I certainly did, you can watch that, and you can watch some of the other shows from our New York studio on video on demand on tv.kabbalah.info. Thank you for joining us, and we're going to go to a very special lesson that took place this morning in Beersheba, in Israel. This is a real turning point of unity in Israel. It's going to make a huge difference for the world. This is the fulfillment of the thought of creation. If it happens there, that means the whole world is tipping towards that higher spiritual desire. Good night, everybody. See you next time.